Welcome to blackfilm.com Rewind with Ellen. I'm your host, Ellen J. Wangero.
And I'm our co-host, Rouge Carter. Hello, Ellen. How are you?
I'm well, Mr. Carter. You look rather dazzling in that. What is that, velvet tuxedo?
Of course, Ellen. It is summertime, and we need to freshen up. This is going to be my voice the whole show, just to show you how bad this is.
Is it though? Is it though, Ro? We are fashionably late. Thank you for your patience. We were getting our proverbial ish together, but here we are. We have been really excited to have this particular conversation in regards to this highly anticipated Respect movie, which dropped August 13th in theaters. And Ro, I don't know about you, but being that this was the second time we watched this, because we watched it back in July at a private press screening at the Dolby Theater in New York. And I remember going into that cinematic experience with a very, I'm here to work, I'm here to do research. And so that's sort of the lens that I watched the film through. And so this time around, I watched it just as a simple spectator, right? And it hit different. Did you kind of feel that, or like what was your vibe watching it again?
Sorry about that. I did the opposite. I actually watched, I took notes. So I apologize to the one girl. We happened to have tickets in the same row. No one else in the theater. I saw a late night show. The only two people in the theater. She's a couple of seats down, and I've got like food with me and stuff. And I snuck some stuff in. I apologize. But I took notes, so I had my phone on the whole time, and I was taking notes. But it was the first time I just watched it and enjoyed it. So we might have some different points, and you might be surprised by what I say later from watching it the second time. You might really be surprised.
Okay. Yeah, for me, the second time around, I went to the theaters. Obviously, it was like 6 people. It was a 4:30 matinee show, discount price. I was excited about that. And I opted for the back row. So I knew that I would be taking notes on my phone. So I opted to sit in the back row where nobody else was seated. And so no one could see the glare of my phone. And it was perfect. And I wondered how well this film would do in theaters, because people are still skeptical about, going to a movie theater and sitting among other people with COVID and the Delta variant and all that. But anyway, my experience was good. I wasn't scared. It went off swimmingly. All right. So everyone knows, what this film is about. It's, Respect traces the Queen of Soul's rise to stardom, and it stars Academy Award winner Jennifer Hudson, who plays young Aretha, Oscar winner Forrest Whitaker, who plays her father C.L. Franklin, Tony Award winner Audrey McDonald, who plays her mom Barbara Franklin, Marlon Wayans, and then of course Grammy Award winner Mary J. Blige, who plays Dinah Washington, just to name a few. So needless to say, or rather suffice it to say, this was a heavy hitter cast. And so we're going to start this with a conversation about young Aretha, which is how the film starts. As Aretha is a child, and it shows her home life and her relationship with her father, and then it goes to young adult Aretha, and so on and so forth. So for me, Sky Dakota Turner, who plays young Aretha, I don't know that there could have been a more perfect cast for that role. Because she holds it down the first 25, 30 minutes of this film. Like, I don't know that I was paying attention to that the first time around, but it was something about this second go around that I looked at her and her acting skills as a young girl and her commitment to her role as young Aretha, knowing the story she would have to tell. And, and we get to see young Aretha's childhood from an interesting perspective, right? Her relationship with her father, which was controlling, and then her relationship with her mother, which was genuinely close. However, her mother didn't grow up in the house with her. What was your take on young Sky Dakota's performance of Aretha.
Well, to piggyback on what you just said, Ellen, I don't think people really understand how when you see the younger person before we go into the adult and learn about their life,
Right.
that sets the ground for how this movie is going to play out. And so it reminded me of the movie Ray, and seeing that young child and playing Ray as a kid, like that scene, you have to sell it, right? And she sold it. I mean, her voice, I was like, what song is she going to sing? And even to see Mary J, like, okay, girl, let me see you. And her voice, woo, the levels in that, and that's a tough song for any kid. I was like, I don't know adults that have been singing for a long time can actually master that. So that was fun. And then you got to see the kind of spirit she was. She loved to sing. She loved the church, all that energy. And then you get to see that later unfold.
And that scene with her, you know, when her father wakes her up in the middle of the night to perform for the party, and we see her walking through that crowd, and she's like, "Hi, Uncle Duke. Hi, Aunt Ella. Hi." Like her family was amongst royalty. Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, they're just chilling at the house having drinks at a party. Are you kidding? So talk about, you know, setting the groundwork for how significant the Franklin family was in that day and age. And the fact that she was able to perform in front of the greats and not even bat an eye. Like you see these adults looking at her like, wow, how is she doing this? And I love what Heather Headley says. Heather Headley plays C.L. Franklin's eventual wife. In that scene, she says, yeah, she has a voice of a 13-year-old turning 30 or something like that. And so that lets you know the sort of power that young Aretha had in her voice. And so then, of course, you know, we get to see the struggles that she went through as a young child, which was really heartbreaking to watch, but also understanding in hindsight, those struggles are what made her who she became to be. And so we're talking about the abuse that she endured as a child that really wasn't like talked about in the film. They alluded to it. And I love, you know, what Dinah Washington, played by Mary J. Blige, said, fast forward a little bit, you know, are you ever going to tell us who your children's fathers are? Because we never, you know, really get to see who that is. And spoiler alert, you know, she was sexually abused as a 12-year-old, and she ended up getting pregnant at 12, but we never really know who the father was. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that messed you up, right? Because they slowly glaze over it, and then that one line by Mary J's character is supposed to be like that makes up for everything that happened. Like, whoa. Yeah. Help me out, explain it so I can really understand what's going on. And you're in the house of a pastor, right? And he's teaching about the words of God and the Lord and all that. And I'm like, how's this happening in your house? And how is that person? Because we're gonna get into it later, but her dad wasn't playing.
He was
doesn't matter who you were. He wasn't shy to pull one out on you. So I was shocked. Like I know there's another back story to that. Who knows if that guy is buried somewhere? Because just the way they showed the way he interacts with anybody, he might have some skeletons. That's all.
That. Absolutely, he does. All you got to do is go to Google and type in his name.
Yeah.
Listen,
I didn't want to do it. I want to stay clean and holy on this. I want to stay.
Well, we'll do that. But, you know, to get the backstory of C.L. Franklin, just Google and see, you know, his backstory, and it explains a lot. So, you know, so here's this little girl who can't really talk about what happened to her during one of her father's glitzy and glamorous parties, right? And so the morning after this abuse happens, you know, her grandmother can see that Aretha is visibly affected. And so I kind of wondered, like, why wouldn't she tell her grandmother in that moment? Because to me, it felt like they had that close relationship. But on the flip side, I understand as a little girl, you're scared shitless. And we don't know what this young man who abused her said to her to kind of keep her, you know, quiet. And so the most heartbreaking part about that was that either that night or the day after, in the night, young Aretha asks her dad when she goes into his office, you know, what if I wasn't here? And to me, that struck a chord because is this little girl contemplating like suicide? Like where's your head at as a little 12, 10, 11, 12-year-old girl that you say to your father, what if I wasn't here? What do you think that meant?
I'm gonna have to fast forward because when she's with her sisters on the bench and they talk about, hey, remember when mom and dad used to argue all the time, and she just blocked it out, right? And so I think a lot of that, she was like, hey, I needed to block it out. So how am I going to block it out as a child? And she chose music to kind of do that and be like, hey, I don't remember any of this stuff. And so that's a pivotal point in this movie to really see, you know, what young Aretha, what the downfalls that'll come later to her because of the things that happened to her earlier. And I guess she had twins.
Yes, I think.
Got her with twins. All right. Yeah, right. It was like, really? And so,
At 12.
yeah, but then.
No, she didn't have twins at 12.
I agree with you, Ellen. I agree with you, but she did. And how do we not know that? I just found this.
Gotcha.
How do I not know that this happened? Once again, another Black story that I just don't know nothing about, but I know, you know, no backstory, but just about, hey, she was a great singer and and this and that. Civil rights and all that. Even civil rights, we'll get into that later. But Aretha's story, woo! I mean, if you're by then, at that point in the movie, this is the first, like, what, 20, 30 minutes of the film? So you're already like, damn, we got more film to do. But how she stayed with the faith, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that there's a positive side to that. But then her being a person that wanted to help others, you know, later on she meets Martin Luther King, who's another friend of the family. I love that. The more and more people they pull out, it's like, oh, anytime Martin called me, I come out and do a show for him, kind of do that. But seeing how that interaction was, and that abandonment, right? I don't know if you remember that, but she was easy to leave her kids. She was like, no, she's like, well, Malcolm, I'm sorry, Martin, you do it. Why can't I do it? I want to help. And I was like, well, you have kids at home. And normally the mom is like, hey, I want to be with my kids and do this. But she's like, no, I want better for myself. So I don't know if mentally that was saying, hey, I didn't cause this. I love my kids, but that wasn't me. I wasn't there to say, hey, I want to be a part of this. I want to start a family. I want to have children. I wasn't allowed to have part in that. I did take part in it, but I didn't have a say in it. So because of that, I can actually leave, you know, out of body and go somewhere else and kind of be who I really want to be. And that was very interesting for me when I watched this film.
I'm going to rewind just a little bit to her mother's death, right? Her mother, again, was played by Audra McDonald. And when you think about not having her biggest inspiration in her life, the effect that caused on young Aretha and then young adult Aretha. I'm thinking specifically about the scene when she's sitting next to her mother and they're playing the piano, and her mother says to her, you don't have to sing if you don't want to, Aretha. Your daddy doesn't own your voice. You don't ever have to fill any man. You are worthy, right? Words to always remember from a mother to a child. And if her mother had been alive throughout her young adult life, I would put money on the fact that, you know, Ted White wouldn't have been a factor. Or maybe he would have, but, you know, maybe she would have left that toxic relationship a little sooner. And so when you think about how those words manifested themselves down the line, or rather how they didn't manifest themselves down the line, it's heavy. It's really weighted, you know, the absence of her mother in her life. What were you going to say?
I don't think we get Aretha.
Well, sure. Yes.
I don't think we get a great singer, but I don't think we get Aretha. You don't understand. I've been playing Aretha all week.
Right.
And I was, there's a new film now. We can actually watch her do a performance in the church. I watched that. And when I tell you the soul and the hurt and the pain, Ted gives her all that hurt. Her mom's death gives her all that hurt. You don't see that in an artist unless you go through pain, trials, and tribulations. So the rape, her mom's death, her dad treating her like crap, but still, and that's a weird relationship too. And then her husband, all that in one big swell group and just trying to understand what is my point in life? What am I supposed to do? Do I want to sing for me, or do I want to sing for my fans? Who am I? And her identity, you try to find that out through the whole film until she finally realizes that. And that's a great voyage, because I think in life overall, we really don't know what we want to do, but we're all always afraid to take chances in life. And so we're scared of what could happen. But then if we take the chance in life, sometimes we come back to what we originally wanted to do. But we needed to take that chance to realize that that was what we needed to do. And so later on in the film, you know, you kind of see her struggle with gospel and like, that's not really who I am. But at the end, it is who she is. But she just had to find her voice in it.
I'm going to fast forward really quick to what you talked about before I rewound. MLK, right? He was a family friend. And so we really get to see Aretha Franklin and how significant social justice was in her life and what it meant to her from a personal standpoint, but also from the standpoint of her people, right? People that looked like her. And so, you know, I had no idea that she marched with Martin Luther King, right? I had no idea. Well, not she wanted to march. Her father wouldn't let her, but she traveled with Martin Luther King, and that's where she saw firsthand the horrors and the hatred towards Blacks. And so that's what made her want to march. But of course, her father put the kibosh on that, rightfully so, because if she had, would she have been the Aretha we came to know and love, to your point? I mean, and I also didn't know that Martin Luther King honored her for her work for the civil rights movement with the proclamation of Aretha Franklin Day. Like, what in the world?
At 25.
At 25. I'm embarrassed to say what I was doing at 25. So, you know, learning that about her was, you know, it changes your perspective on who she was.
Well, also, and so that leads me into her father, right? How much control he wanted over her. But it's a point, right? In life, it's what, the early 60s, and young Aretha, he wants to get her signed. She's in Motown, Detroit. All her friends, Smokey Robinson's at the party. Everybody's having a good time. So we're going to rewind just a little bit. And they're hanging out. And they're like, hey, we want to get you on this. We love you, Aretha. We want to get you hanging out. Sam Cooke has a label. So this is where you see the future of Black business. And Sam Cooke, you know, we watched the movie before, A Night in Miami, and he owned his own label. And so he was creating something for people of color. And to see her dad not go with that, he's like, hey, you know, Sam Cooke wants her, but I'm going to go with Columbia. And so I get that one aspect of trying to take her out of that, but why not try to give us more chances to grow as people? So that was an interesting take that I took from the movie as well. Just Black entrepreneurship back then, and how we sometimes cut our legs off, you know, in spite of just like, hey, you know, we want to go a different route because we know we want these people. But you don't know, Sam Cooke reached so many people. And that was interesting to me that she turned them down. But I think if Aretha was a little more of an adult or young, she was a very young woman at the time, I think she would have gone with them. And that would have been interesting to see what Motown would have really became.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, and it just, you know, learning about who her father was, I could see him saying, yeah, we not dealing with that. We're gonna go over here to, you know, to Columbia Records. And who knows, Columbia Records was probably offering the highest bid. And at the end of the day, Pops was probably like, we're gonna go with the money, and we're gonna go with who is going to make Aretha or turn Aretha into mainstream success. Maybe the way Motown wouldn't have been able to do right off the bat. And also when you think about the machine behind Columbia, who knows if Pops was like, I'm gonna go with the bigger machine, you know, because my daughter is who she is.
Well, I think Mary J. Blige called him out on that. You know, he's like, you're gonna go with your dad, the Booker T. Washington route. And so there were levels to it, right?
Yeah.
There was you know, Black folks and then Black folks. And so you saw, and so to go back to my joke earlier, Marlon Wayans, shout out to him in this movie. I had a little hate earlier because his voice was so different than it didn't need to be compared to the original character. But as I watched it the second time, this is what I was telling you, I was gonna make up for it. As I watched it the second time, everybody had a voice. And it was different than a regular, like everyday black voice at that time. It was a more sophisticated, because I had to remember, they didn't hang out with the, in the hoods and doing something like that. This is the upper echelon of black folks. Blacks. This is the earlier Jay-Z and Beyonce's, before their time. So that's the voice you heard. And so that made sense to me. Now I get it now why Marlon spoke like that. Because it was like, hello, how are you? Hello, Aretha. I'm going to take you out tonight and have a great time. And I was like, why is he talking like that? But now it all made sense because even her father spoke like that and she spoke like that. It wasn't a nasty, hey, get out of my face. It was like, no, out of respect. And so I apologize to Marlon. Definitely hit it right, and it made sense to me watching the second time. So there's a lot of hidden gems in this movie. Watching it twice definitely opened up my eyes to not only her career, but also all the things that were going on. And I'll say one last thing, being a black man, Marlon playing Ted White's character, I thought about the highs and lows that he must have had to go into an office, right? And be her manager and literally talk to people like, hey, all these white guys, like, in a time where white people can literally come up and just kill you. A white man can just kill you and be like, he got in my way. And that's it. But he would come in there and say, no, you're not doing this. You're not doing that. Get out of my face. And that must have in a time where there was drugs, there was just like crime. You could be killed at any moment. And you're looked at as the N-word. And now you have some power. I couldn't even imagine what my brain would have been going through at that time. So I understand. I don't agree with it, but I understand his ups and downs as a character, struggling as a black man with no talent, but just trying to cling on to something. And that was the closest thing he could. And that was Aretha.
And that speaks volumes to the powerhouse that Aretha was, right? That this black man could roll into a conference room full of white executives and talk as much shit and be as disrespectful as he was. and if anything, they apologize for their tone to him. That was insane. And great segue to Ted White, Marlon Wayans' character. So this relationship, I had a love-hate relationship with their love affair, because in the beginning, and the first time that I watched it, I don't know that I grasped onto this straw as tightly as I did the second time that I watched it. I actually appreciated the innocence and the naivete of their love affair. Like when they first met, when Aretha's father threw a party at their family home, you saw the instant connection, the way Aretha looked at him, the way he looked at her, and then the way everybody else looked at them, because everyone else knew the scoundrel that he was. And in that moment, Aretha didn't know, but it didn't matter. So it's interesting because they allude that he was a pimp in the film. But I don't know how accurate that is. If anything, he was obviously, a player and, a ladies' man and just, one of those guys that he cannot.
Same thing.
Player, same thing, same difference. But when you think about the correlation between pimp husband and sort of pimp dad, right? The way Ted White pimped Aretha is kind of the same way C.L. Franklin pimped his daughter, in terms of, you gonna get out on the stroll and you gonna sing, you gonna make this money, and and this is what it's going to be. And it's weird how the word demons kept popping up. Like the father kept hitting her over the head with, oh, you know how your demons get you, Aretha, you got to get it together. Her husband would also, throw the demons out to her. And when you think about them being the two main causes of her pain, meanwhile, they're the ones throwing the word demons at her as if they're not the impetus for said demons. I thought that was interesting. In that scene when, C.L. Franklin, Forrest Whitaker's character, slaps her in front of John Hammond because she's 68 minutes late to her recording session. And then you see the look in John's face. He's in disbelief at this, the way this relationship between father and daughter is playing out in front of him. And so you can't help but think, like, what is this white man thinking about this relationship, about this man, and about Aretha. It's almost like everyone kind of saw Aretha in this, very delicate place with her father, but none of them had the power to do anything, right? And so that
was gonna slap his daughter. What makes you think he ain't gonna slap me?
Listen. Whew.
Right?
Yeah, that was tough. That was tough to watch because at that stage, Aretha is like 19, 20? Like, what's happening? But, again, that speaks to the relationship, the abusive relationship.
And again, he didn't hold on. I'm not condoning the smack at all, but I want to make sure we understand the smack. The smack wasn't because she was late. Smack was because she had some back lip. And that was because of smack. Back lip.
Listen, people can't handle the truth. The truth hurts, right? So,
I remember as a child, I did back lip to my mom. She smacked me beside my head. You can't do certain back lip.
But
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that if I talk back to my dad at 20, I'm getting a slap across.
No. We definitely we're gonna go outside. But
we're gonna wait till we get home.
14,
right.
15. I know. I'm like, oh, that's my bad. Yeah, I messed up on that. But I mean, that's the child I think that was still in her, right?
Right.
That was allowing men to treat her like that. Because again, she lost her mom at a young age, so not knowing what a woman is really like, and grandma is just submissive to like, I will help. Oh, you have another child. Oh, great, bring him over. I'll take the kids. Like, that's a whole nother. Yeah. Grandma was just like, I'll take her. I'll take the kids. No problem. I'll do that. So there's a whole nother thing, and she kind of knew his life, the way her dad was treating her, and it's like, well, you know what? Let's find a positive in this negative, and that's it. Not really talking to her. That's the only point earlier, young Aretha, that she actually said, "Hey, are you okay?" Otherwise, just like, okay, let's just do something else. Let's just keep going. And
let's be clear, that was CL's mother, so she was under his thumb. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was not someone to align yourself with, because she, her allegiance was to her son, rightfully so. However, you also have an allegiance to your granddaughter, right? So, as tumultuous and as toxic as her relationship with Ted White was, it was sort of a love affair of the ages in the beginning, right? So I like that we got to see like the beauty of it in the beginning, right? And then we see it unravel in a really heartbreaking way, and that was a cautionary tale if I've ever seen it. And so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. A turning point in Aretha's career, in my mind, was when she performed at the Village Vanguard in Dinah, Washington. Mary J. Blige's character was there. And Aretha, proceeded to sing a Dinah Washington song. And then Dinah just flips the table and she's like, don't you ever disrespect the queen. Don't you ever sing a song in front of the queen. How dare you be disrespectful? But that was a turning point in Aretha's career, because Dinah challenged her. Like, yo, are you going to go ahead and sing, songs that you don't want to sing? Or are you going to sing songs that move you? Like, what are you doing? So as traumatic for Aretha, as that experience was for her, it was a turning point and a really, really good one. I think Dinah challenged her artistry in its direction to be geared towards, the songs that we now love and cherish till this day. And so while Mary J. Blige's character, it was brief, it was significant.
It hit hard.
And it hit hard in several ways. All right, so I'm going to move on to a scene that we both were hit hard by. Sunday dinner. Aretha invites Ted after the father has made it very clear, you are not to fraternize with this man. So by this time they've fallen in love, they're both head over heels. So Aretha invites Ted to the family dinner. And what ensues was just, it was breathtaking. I don't know any man that on a Sunday is carrying a gun in his pocket, just ready to bust off just in case, which is exactly what happens when Aretha, makes it clear, like, this is who I want to be with. And her father, being who he is, pulls out a gun, on Ted White, Marlon Wayans' character, and basically gives his daughter an ultimatum. It's either this jive turkey or it's us. And Aretha, of course, chooses the love of her life at that time. What did you think of that scene? How did that scene impact you, rather?
Yeah. At that point, I don't know who was more gangster, right?
Right.
Because Ted's still talking like, hey, man, I'm still going to be with your daughter. I'm like, he's got a gun out. You might want to chill. I'm like, my bad. But that shows the bravado of him and who he was. He's like, I don't care. I really think Aretha, her choice and her decision there was a way out. And I don't think it was more for the love, as you spoke on, more of like, I see Ted as a way out of this. I'm done with the church. I'm done with being used. I'm going to be used in a different way, but in my mind, I'm thinking a way that I can find my talents and my strengths. Not the way my dad keeps using me for the church and stuff like that. I don't mind it, but I don't want to keep going on tour with him and kind of do this. So I want to find my voice. And again, I think Ted is, in her mind, offered that. That's why she's like, I got to leave with him. Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, even after, when he leaves the room, Ted's like, so to her sisters, go ahead, go make me a plate. Like, get your
the nerve.
So that's just how he was, which is, I'm sure he was fun to drink with until like that 6 or 7 drink, and then he's like, Ted's acting up again. 3 drink Ted was probably a good time. 3 drink Ted is good. 6 drink Ted, not so much.
And so that scene was yet another pivotal moment in Aretha's life. She is leaving one abuser for another, her not knowing what's to come in her relationship with Ted, right? Because it's very clear that her relationship with her father was abusive to some extent, so she's shedding her skin from that, only to step into a worse situation with a man that she barely knows. All right, so and kudos to Marlon Wayans for bringing that character home the way that he did. I think this scene, this film in his first dramatic leading role sort of sets the tone for what's to come for dramatic roles for Marlon Wayans. So I'm glad that it was him that got this part. All right, so moving on to producer Jerry Wexler, who played a very interesting role. He's played by Mark Maron. And so when you think about Jerry Wexler and how we got to see Aretha kind of find her voice, because now she's, to your point, she's left her father in his controlling ways as it relates to her music and dictating what sort of music she's going to sing. Jerry Wexler sort of provides this safe space for her to sort of, discover who she wants to be and what she wants to sing. One of my favorite recording scenes, in-studio recording scenes, is the Muscle Shoals, Alabama, I think it was 66 or 67, when, that whole scene with the band, the white band, and they're trying to figure out this song that one of Ted White's writers wrote, right? I think it was the recording of I Never Love a Man the Way That I Love You. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Just the creation of that song. I've always been fascinated by studio sessions and how songs come together, how all these moving parts come together to create this masterpiece. And I thought that specific scene really showed Aretha's gravitas, really showed her her keen sense of music. Like, this woman knew music inside and out. And so that's our sort of first introduction to that. What did you think about that scene?
I love that scene. I wish they gave me more scenes of that. Like you hit the nail on the head, Ellen. There's something about the creativism that goes into a song. And when you see that and like, oh my God, how do they, and they edited that and they put that there, and then guys coming in with a little bit, oh, give me a little bit more. I'm like, woo! And that's fire, right? We don't really get to see that often. But when you have that on, we get to see an insight to that. But later on, when she sings with her sister, like, that's beautiful too. That's another scene. I'm like, ooh, and that's just off the dome. it's kind of like it would be like a version of like a freestyle nowadays, right? And so that was beautiful to see them come together. But people, if you don't understand music, I played an instrument growing up, but for people that didn't, to time in with what a singer and understand when to come in on a song, that's, you don't understand. That's striking lightning in a bottle, and it's very rare that you can do that. And that goes to her, like, I want hits. You know how hard it is to make a hit? Do you understand
Oh,
how
yeah.
hard it is to make it? People think, oh, it's easy. You just do one thing and do it this way. No, it's so much energy. It can sometimes not even be the words, and just that one, like that sax comes in or that guitar rip comes in, and you're like, oh my God, this is what brought it all together. And to see and white dudes coming, I'm not saying that white dudes have talent, but like to feel the soul of Aretha. Like if you would have told me like that was again, if I couldn't see if I was blind, and I couldn't see the film, and you would have told me that there was all white dudes jamming with her, I would have been like, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. So hats off to them. Beautiful, well done. But the moment for me was her with her sister and Ted jumping in and out of that conversation when they go live and they show her how to do it. This is how we create here. Well, Aretha, she really feels the music. And when she feels the music, everybody loves it. It's great. Here we go. And I was like, ugh.
And you're talking about her sister Carolyn, who wrote Ain't No Way. And Carolyn is played by Haley Kilgore. Right. And so we, got to see, this might have been the first time we got to see how uncomfortable Ted White was with the attention not being on him, right? Because that was such a special, special moment between Aretha and Carolyn, especially when they were holding hands at the end of them singing at the recording session. That moment really signified, it's almost like Carolyn wrote that song with Aretha in mind. And so while Aretha is singing it, we see Ted sort of his face morph, and we see the hurt and whatever he must have been feeling, guilt, most likely. We see all that sort of, come to fruition on his face. And, in Ted White fashion, he sort of inserts himself and tears sort of like their hand lock apart to come across as, it's still me. I'm responsible for this. And, if anything, that, sort of fed the storyline of who the type of man Ted White was. He was for self, right? As much as he might have loved Aretha, ultimately his insecurities and his own demons could not allow him to let her shine without him having to be front and center. And so, all right, so now we're kind of rolling into free Aretha, right? Aretha once, or not even once she's found her voice, but Aretha on the way to finding her voice and shedding the skin that is Ted White. The last straw, with Ted White is after it comes out in some press conference that he hit her. And Aretha is just sort of floored. She doesn't know what to say. They escort her away. And then we see in this hotel room him try to spin it as if he never hit her. And I think that's when Aretha sort of she has her come to Jesus moment and decides to be done with that. And then the song Freedom comes into play. What did you think about that?
So two things at that point. It reminded me of Summer of Soul that we did, and how if she can speak up there, she can almost trick her brain that, oh, that's right, you didn't hit me upside my head. That's how I felt in that moment. Like, it's one of those things, like, if someone didn't, because think about it, it's back then, right? So you don't have any video. Now you can put everything on the gram and do everything, but you didn't have it. So if he knocked you upside your head, if one or two people saw it, unless you had a photograph of it or a video of it, it didn't happen, right? And so I saw her brain. I was like, oh, Aretha, this is your time. You got to speak up, baby girl. And she did. And that scene, oh my God, when she sings and they pan to Ted White and she belts it out. It's a beautiful scene because they pan to black, and then all of a sudden she comes back out and the light shines and she hits that high note. And I'm like, there she is. And he's like, oh man, that's it. She doesn't need me anymore. And he realized that, and that beautiful cinematic moment there. on the screen. Jennifer Hudson, shout out to you. You captured that moment. And hey, Jennifer Hudson has become an amazing actress. She's always been an amazing singer, but this movie really shows her skill set of what she can do. So I'd love to see her in more roles like this, you know, being the main woman on screen, one of those little rom-com love scenes or something like that. But she was amazing in this and really showed her levels.
Yeah, I second that. I don't know that I appreciated her as an actor the first time I watched this. It was the second time that I, you know, and all the nuances of her head movements, the way she had her face when she was saying something specific. There were a lot of little moving parts that fed the bigger picture of her playing Aretha. And so, you know, hats off to her because she pulled this off beautifully. It was almost like we weren't watching Aretha, we were watching Jennifer portray Jennifer, you know, and that says a lot about someone's acting ability. Now, I'd be interested in seeing Jennifer in a role that has nothing to do with singing, right? And what that looks like. I think that would be the next step, because I feel like this film has sort of proven in my eyes, like she can hold her own even without her singing. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see what that's going to look like.
Challenge.
Right. Huh?
Challenge.
Right. Challenge. So, all right. So winding down. So this gospel album that she ended up making, you know, it's interesting because as a kid, she started in church. And as a young woman, this film ends up with her in church. And when you think about all the things that sort of led up to her going back to church, obviously she hit rock bottom and she had to come to terms with her demons. And shout out to Titus Burgess. Love him, from The Impossible Kimmy Schmidt. The role he played as Reverend Dr. James Cleveland, I think they were two additional pivotal points in Aretha's life. What he said to her as a child after her mother died and she stopped speaking for an X amount of time. And he says to her, music will save your life, right? And then fast forward to her hitting rock bottom. She's drinking heavily. She's pushing all the people that love her away. And he says to her, you know, those aren't demons that are chasing you. That's the pain that you have not dealt with. And when you think about the personal pain that you go through, in Aretha's case, it stems from, you know, the issues with her father, her mother's death, being abused as a little girl, never being able to talk about it, how she carried that through her life. When you think about the snowball effect of pain that creates in somebody's soul and somebody's mind, oh my God. And so to have that moment sort of come to fruition in the end with Titus Burgess, and she's able to deal with that finally, and this gospel album helps her do that. You know, and in the film, she sort of makes amends with her father, because he finally tells her how proud he is of her. He finally tells her that you are walking in the Spirit of God, because at one point he told her she wasn't. And it was shortly after he said that to her that she spiraled out of control. Whew, that's a lot. The power that parents have, I'm sure people are aware of it, but when you think about when you don't show love, when you don't speak love to a child, the damage that does, it's crazy. That's all I could think about throughout this movie. So the gospel album, I mean, how dope was that? You and I talked about that for a bit, I think in episode 24, and the significance of it being turned into a documentary film. What did you think of that?
Yeah, so I actually watched the documentary film the other night.
Of course you did.
Oh my God. And so to see him, to go back to the Reverend, there was another quote he did. He said, "Don't let nothing come between you and your music, Ree." And that was the quote for me. I was like, that's the one. And so she had to go back to her roots. And I said that earlier, right? It comes full circle, but she had to find her voice first. And when she found her voice, like, I got to go back to what I know I'm comfortable with and what kept me on the right track. And that's speaking the word of the Lord. And they use the same church, because in the actual movie that you watch of the original Aretha Franklin singing, it's a crazy Jesus on the back wall. He's like, what's like, it's like surfing Jesus on the back wall.
Oh wow, okay.
So but I paid attention to it because I'm like, is that? And then when I watched the movie, I was like, oh my God, they actually use the same church, or unless they got the same mural somewhere, but it's the exact same Jesus in the background of the wall. And it blew my mind. I was like, I found it just funny. But the singers in there, I mean, there's so many little nuances in the live performance that she did that day. I mean, her gold, her glow, I mean, sweat. It looked like they put diamonds all over her face in the original scene. And so Jennifer Hudson capturing Aretha Franklin in that moment was pivotal to really close this movie. So you can really see the struggle that she went through. And the church, when oh my God, when you see this, you have to see both. Yeah, there's so many things just you can really understand how powerful Aretha Franklin was. Like, they went to church that day. They're doing a live show performance. People go, oh, woo! The background singers, everybody, the choir, everybody is like, woo! Oh, girl, amen, amen. And I wish they would have captured that more in the film. But that got me just hyped to see her perform and sing. Oh, man. And that's another scene that you get to see them create. And there's something about it. If you've ever been to a black church, you've never been to a black church, I don't care what kind of religion you're in, something will move you.
For sure.
Either the person next to you go get out the way and they got to do their dance, or just the energy. I've seen a choir where 3 people wake up the whole entire room. So it just, when the Lord is in the building, he's in the building. That's all I can say about that.
He's in the building. Church music will move you. If it's done and sang correctly, you will walk out of there spiritually moved. Just really quickly, going back to yet another quote, significant quote, Heather Headley's character, she says to Aretha, do your thing as big and as loud as you can. And I loved that, because that's what Aretha ended up doing. So there were really, these gems, these quotes sort of sprinkled throughout this film that I feel helped carry Aretha to greatness, which was really special. Yeah, and so Aretha produced this gospel album. Like, she took full ownership and full control, and of course it became the best-selling album of her life. Like, hello, she should have taken full control way earlier, but life happens the way that it does. Yeah, now I have to go and watch that original documentary.
Honestly, you have to watch it. I mean, almost to tears, because they zoom in on her and there's a spirit that you just see come out of her. And now the film explains the darkness.
Yeah.
And then when you see that, you're like, woo! And you feel it. You feel like all these things coming out of her all over the room. And you're just like, wow. It's just a beautiful moment that's captured on film. I can't believe they were able to do that. So I highly recommend see both.
So out of 10, what would you give this? What would you rate this film?
Oh, you gonna do this to me right now?
Yes, sir.
Make me do a 10. Oh Lord. Oh Lord.
What would you rate the film?
So here's what I do. When it comes to films, bios about artists, Ray is up there for him. Raise my 10. So okay. I'm gonna give this. I'm giving it 8. Give it 8.
An 8.
You are not even in the. You know, and Mark.
I'm not gonna judge. Okay.
No, listen. 7.5, 8. There's more scenes that could have been tight, but I love just her story and so many things that I didn't know about her, and that I was happy to know, and I wanted to know more about it. So I think at the end, when you watch a film, if there's still some things that I'm curious about and I want more answers to, and I actually am Googling stuff about this person, that has struck a chord with me. And so I don't think a lot of those films kind of do that, right? It's just like, oh, I watched this movie about so and so. Oh, it was great. They answered all the questions. But no, now I'm asking, like, oh, why was she like this? Why did she do this? Did this really go down like this? And that they have footage, and I'm like, it even blows you away even more. So 7.5, 8. It's a must see.
Okay.
What you got?
I'm gonna give it a 9, only because I would have wanted to see a lot more recording sessions.
Yes, exactly.
With Jennifer Hudson, just doing what she does best, because those scenes affected me differently. Like something just flowed differently in my spirit, in my body, in my mind whenever it was in at a recording session. So I would have loved to see more of those. Yeah. So if you have not seen this film, my God, I don't know what you are waiting for. Movie theaters are empty. No one, go during the day, when people are working. You have to watch this film. You have to learn about Aretha Franklin, beyond the icon that she was, beyond the celebrity that she was. There's something about understanding where someone has come from and what they've been through that helps you understand and respect their journey a whole lot more. Like, I feel guilty that I didn't know this when she was alive. I'm not, I don't know what I would have done differently, but there's something about that that's kind of bugging me, that I wish I would have known that beforehand. But, I'm glad that I do regardless. And to your point, we talked about this a couple of episodes before. Make sure you stay to the very end.
Yes.
Right. Because
I did it again. It just, man, I almost yelled because the girl got up and left, and I was like, no,
sit down.
I wanted to say, no, sit down. You want? I didn't do it.
I cried. I cried, like tears coming down my face at the end. And as I was walking out, the usher was like, ma'am, are you okay? And I was just like, go away. I'm having a moment. But there was something about watching that entire film and then watching the Aretha sing that just opened up the floodgates in a way that I was not expecting.
And you know why? Because I want to see that song created, right? And I was like, that's one of our biggest songs. I'm like, why aren't we seeing this? And then when it hit you, like, it was perfect. The crescendo at the end of I was like, thank you. I'll add one last thing on this. It reminded me, women of color, self-love, self-care. Oh, please, please, please remind yourself every day, self-love and self-care. We all need it, but I feel that women go through so many things that there's never an answer to, and they just got to keep on working and working and working. And there's all these demons again, or just things that pile up, and we never get to dissect them or process them. So that's the one thing that really struck out to me in this film, is giving that self-love and self-care to yourself, that moment of clarity, so that you can move on and be the mom you need to be the lover you need to be in your relationship, be the friend you need to be, or the daughter, the sister, whatever it is. Because sometimes we forget that. We don't give ourselves that time because we're just running. Or society tells us we need to just keep going. But now we're opening up now to more, especially for women too. Like, I can have an off day. I can say I need time off, and more people, athletes. But it'll be interesting to see how that affects the workplace of people saying, hey, you know what? I need to unwind. That vacation I needed. Sometimes I need a vacation from the vacation. Yeah, because I didn't really process and unwind myself. So if anything, COVID has made me mindful of is really seeing the time we need to give to ourselves and each other. And just, hey, instead of taking it the wrong way, I'm like, maybe that person is going through some things that I really just don't understand, and give them, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Before I say, oh, I hate that person, or talk bad behind their backs, because that energy goes to 5 more other people, and they spread it, and they spread it. It's contagious. Kind of like your own version of COVID.
Right. Look at you. Well stated.
I'm deep.
Well stated, my friend. I don't have anything to add to that. You've wrapped it up beautifully. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Rewind with Ellen. Again, we've been looking forward to this conversation, so I'm glad that we dedicated almost an hour talking about.
We're gonna get yelled at for this. I'm sorry. We're gonna get yelled at for this one. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Listen, and if we had it our way, we could keep talking about it, but we won't. It's been an hour already, so thank you for tuning in and joining us and hanging out with us. And we will see you same time, same place next week for episode 30. Ro, thank you as always. I love that you dressed up for this occasion. You look very snazzy. Keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Good night, everyone.